everyone, and welcome to the Preserving History and Democracy podcast. My name is Caroline Zamora, and I'm the Chief Deputy County Clerk. Today on the podcast with us today, we have Angelica Valenzuela, our Recording and Filing Supervisor.
Hi, everybody.
We also have Cynthia Diaz, our Communications Coordinator.
Yes, thank you.
And our special guest, because we are on tour today, which is what we call it when we actually get to leave the office for a podcast. We take the podcast on tour. But we have a very special guest, Emily Wilson. But before we talk to Emily, real quick, we're going to tell you, you're going to see lots of B-roll in this episode because we are in a very cool place. We are at the Taylor-Mesilla Historic Site. And I'm so excited. There's so much stuff to look at. We're all kind of geeking out a little bit. We're very excited. And thank you for listening today. Cynthia, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so like Caroline said, we're here with Emily Wilson. Emily, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself, what your role is here at the Historic
Absolutely.
Site? Yeah.
So my name is Emily Wilson. I am the site manager for Taylor-Mesilla and Fort Selden Historic Sites. So I oversee the southern region here.
Cool.
And I do everything from making sure our reports are in on time to moving objects with the collection specialist to interpretive planning. And sometimes I even scrub a toilet.
So yeah, for listeners who might not know what the Taylor-Mesilla Historical Site is, can you kind of go through what it is and kind of a little bit of a history around it? There's so much history around it, but maybe...
Yeah. So I'll start with the basics. So I work for the Department of Cultural Affairs, which is a cabinet department within the state of New Mexico, which is incredible because the Department of Cultural Affairs is really the only kind of it's in the entire nation. So we get to do some really cool stuff. And so within that, my division is New Mexico Historic Sites. And so Taylor-Mesilla Historic Site is actually the newest and the 8th historic site throughout the state. And it is an incredible place. So the best way I have found to put it is that we are an art museum within a historic home on a historic plaza. So we are multifaceted and we get to do a lot of really cool things. We have our Reynolds store, which is our visitor center. That's where everybody will come in and get checked in. Usually you'll talk to Ed, who's our customer service rep. He'll get you your tickets. In the Reynolds store, we have the Story Vault, which I would love to talk about later, our listening stations, and then we do have some exhibits that we rotate through in there. And then the second building that is a part of the historic site we refer to as the Barella Store, and that is where the Friends of Taylor-Mesilla Historic Site, they operate the gift shop. So everything that you buy there goes back to supporting our mission through the Friends. And then if you walk down Zaguan, a beautiful hallway through a courtyard, and then in another Zaguan, you're in the historic site. And I think it'll be fun to talk about that today.
So all three buildings are part of the historic site?
Yes, so they total to be about 9,000 square feet. We have two courtyards, the inner courtyard and the rear courtyard. And then, like I was saying, the Barella store, which is the second storefront, is leased out to the Friends group.
Very cool. So, Kim, how old is this building? Let's start there.
It varies.
Okay.
So each portion of the house and the storefronts were built at different points. So the Barella store was built 1850s, and then we've got 1910, and then we just kind of keep going back. This space that we're actually sitting in was added in 1970. So it really varies. Pick a room and we can go back through the history.
I love that. I love that. I'm sure we could walk around through the history and just kind of look at like different architectural, which I know we're going to get into, and just looking at, like, I'm kind of just here where we are. I'm like, okay, the roofs was different from over there, you know, and so you can see how the architecture changes, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. And it's a lot of fun. You know, as visitors kind of go around especially on our self-guided experience, that takes you through the center portion of the house. So you can't really see the north or the south sides unless you're on a guided tour. But we do have kiosks throughout that kind of talk about the architecture, and it's literally a map of our building, and then you just click on a room, and you can look at what special architectural feature is in that space, which is a lot of fun. And
yeah, that's a really neat feature.
It's a really cool interactive too, because it gives, adults and children alike the opportunity to interact and kind of place themselves in the space, but also highlight what's different, which is kind of fun.
So you said the building dates back to the 1850s. What was Mesilla like during that time?
Different.
Yeah.
Smaller. We are in the borderlands, which is a big part of our mission here at the Taylor-Mesilla Historic Site, is talking about the borderlands. And Mesilla was Mexico, and then America, and then the river changed, and it was Mexico again, and it just kind of keeps going like that.
Right.
There are some anecdotes about some brawls breaking out on the street. So I feel like it would have more of a Wild West kind of vibe to it.
One thing I do want to go ahead and touch on is the Varela store. Was the Varela store always a mercantilist store?
As far as I know, so I saw on our list that Mariano, he is actually someone that I'm not super familiar with. Now, if you were to sit down with Alexandra McKinney, who is our instructional coordinator, she could probably tell you a lot more about him. But as far as back as my well of knowledge goes, we can start with Anastasio Barilla. And so under him, it absolutely was a mercantile. And this is kind of one of those fun things that we get to talk about with territorial New Mexico and borderlands architecture, is we see these storefronts built on plazas. And so they build the storefronts up front on the plaza so that everybody walking by can check them out, know what's going on. And then they will build one room behind a house. And so one of the oldest rooms in the house is actually the front sala.
Okay.
And so it is directly off of the Barilla store. And yeah, some fun mercantiles.
That is really cool. So it was just it was like a one room house, or was like, okay,
Apartment.
yeah, it was
yeah,
like a big
kind
apartment.
of.
Okay.
So it's really fun, and I don't want to get ahead of myself because I know we'll probably talk about it down the road. But we see these storefronts built on the plaza, and then everybody is doing their commercial work up there, and then they build their residential behind. So it typically does start out with kind of one room. And then families grow, and people come into town, and so we build again, and we build a room right behind it. And then another child's born, maybe we have a grandkid, we build again. And then that is how the site just kept growing. And that's just on the north side. We haven't even started talking about the south side.
I love that. Yes. So during the Civil War era, Barela was actually a Confederate sympathizer.
He was. Funnily enough, not many people know this, but Mesilla was the Confederate capital for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Don't quote me here, but I think it was around like 12 to 13 months. Didn't last super long. And then Confederacism was kind of pushed out of the area. Along with that, took our sympathizers. So like Mr. Barilla, he did leave, which led to something really cool, is when we talk about, it's Women's History Month, isn't it?
It is.
It is.
Yes.
When we're talking about women gaining rights and property rights and everything, Mr. Barilla did, in fact, have to sign his property over to Rafaela, and he does, and then he kind of flees.
Is Rafaela his wife? Or?
His wife, I think.
Cool.
Interesting, Rafaela Barela. And so he signed it. So he signed over the property to his wife, and he leaves with the rest of the Confederate sympathizers. That is so fascinating.
Yeah.
I never knew.
Me neither.
Yeah.
And does Rafaela continue to run the business?
She does, and so does her son. So her son's name is Mariano. They kind of take over the business together. They keep running it, and then, we kind of see some more fun stuff come down the line.
Cool.
Do you have any I don't know, any like perspective knowledge about how rare it was for a woman to own their own business and their own property during that era.
Not super common. If we just look at the general history of women's rights in the 1850s, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of allowance for commercial business ownership, property ownership. Usually it's tied to the man in your family, whether that's a patriarchal figure, a father, or a husband after you've been married. Typically your land rights and stuff like that would be given to your husband. But this is a nice case where, Mr. Barilla was wrapped up in some stuff and he had to get moving. And so
He had to flee.
Yeah. And so, Rafaela and her son, they got to have the property.
I was going to go back to what we were talking about regarding women's rights and reflecting on business ownership. Even on our old voter rolls, we can see that women, when they did get to vote, they voted under their husband's name.
Wow.
So if Rafaela voted, it would be listed as Mrs.
Barilla.
What is
Anastasio.
he? Anastasio, yeah,
Anastasio.
Mrs. Anastasio Barilla.
No kidding.
Right.
Now, see, that's a fun fact I didn't know.
That's crazy.
New Mexico has some of the earliest women's rights to vote because women were allowed to vote in education matters.
Love that.
Yeah. It's a fun fact about New Mexico voting history. Let's talk about the Reynolds Griggs store. Those are also, if you're not from Las Cruces, but you are from Las Cruces, you've probably heard those street names. Griggs is a big name. Reynolds is a big name and so it's funny when we do these episodes and we get to talk about the people that like streets are named after and like, it's just something that that you never think of. You just think, oh, they must have picked a name, but no, there were actually people behind this. And
It's the community link.
Yes,
Yeah. So if you were to walk up on the Mesilla Plaza, you're standing at the bandstand and you turn to have the San Albino on your right. San Albino is on your right. You're standing at the bandstand. If you look directly in front of you, you're going to see a bright blue facade with some tin on it. That is what we refer to as the Reynolds store. So that's where Reynolds and Griggs were selling their stuff, their wares. And that is what we refer to as the south side of the property that we manage.
So Charles Reynolds later remodeled the store. Do you know what kind of architectural changes he made?
So Mr. Reynolds was actually from East Coast, Midwest territories. Right. And as we know, that's actually where I hail from. Oh, cool. I'm from the Midwest. So architectural styles are a little bit different. Right. And you can see the influence of that when he comes out this way. You're seeing the more triangular, like shaped on the front facade. Right. You come inside, there's a mezzanine that takes you up. It's just not the same typical style you see in territorial New Mexico.
And I think that's why it looks so grand, because it sticks out right from the rest of the plaza. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, the railroad comes into town. We start seeing catalogs. It's easier to ship new materials. So we've got wood, and then that's where that tin facade comes from. You're finally able to order some tin out this way. You get it embossed. Tin working is very popular in New Mexico. We do, side note, we do a tin working program.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So keep an eye out for that anytime, because we really do enjoy doing that. But that's when we start seeing those kind of architectural changes. That's when we start seeing kind of an influx of tin roof as well. And so you can see that with Mr. Reynolds' influence. We also see that as he's owning property behind, in some of the rooms on the front half of the site, so much closer to behind the storefronts, you're going to see a little bit of different roofing than what you would see in here. We're in the Sala Grande right now, and we've got a Latia and Viga ceiling above us. But in some rooms, we do see this kind of paneled roof. Which is different, a paneled ceiling, and that's because of his different influence.
Cool.
That is so interesting. So I wonder, we have these two folks kind of owning these two stores at the same time. And if you don't know the answer to this question, we'll take it out. Okay,
so it's actually not at the same time.
Okay, interesting.
So the Reynolds store wasn't built until a little bit later.
Okay.
Somewhere in the range of like 60 years.
Okay.
So 1850s to about 1900, 1910.
So their ownership never overlapped?
No, not, at least not with Mr. Brilla and Mr. Reynolds at the same time.
Got it. Okay. Sounds good. Do we know if there were any, and again, if you don't know this, I'm just curious.
No, that's
okay.
okay.
Yeah, do we know if there were any, like, strife between the two owners?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, none that I'm aware of. By the time that we're seeing Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Griggs owning a storefront, we're not really going to see Mr. Barella. And I am trying to envision. I have a mental image of the change of ownership, the deed ownership.
Love talking about deed ownership.
I'm like envisioning it in my head of, because I can't even say for sure if Mariano Barella would overlap.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And Mariano, again, reminder, was Mr. Barella's son.
Yes. Who was running the storefronts with Rafaela.
Got it. With his mom.
Yes, with his
Very
mom.
cool.
Who owned the property.
Love.
Cool, love that. Love that for her.
I do too.
So Charles Reynolds eventually lost the property and gave the mortgage to Father Juan Grange. Can you talk about Father Juan Grange?
Yes. So he, Charles had requested a loan, and he was no longer able to make his payments. So Father Grange took over the mortgage again, and he's a French man. He's kind of why we see some of the bricks that we do on the San Albino. Cool. So
you know what we've done, just so our listeners know, we if you go back and listen to the episode on St. Genevieve's, we talk about the French influence, because we think that at that time there must have been just this kind of a lot of French priests were coming to the area,
right,
which is why St. Genevieve's is styled kind of after Notre Dame. And so it's interesting that we also had
some French influence.
A French influence here in Mesilla, because St. Gen was the first church in Las Cruces, and of course San Albino, which I actually think St. Gen, the original site, was older than San Albino,
really?
if I'm remembering that episode correctly. But the original
okay.
site, yes,
like
not the current one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to say it was like 2 years. It's not like a big, it's not like much older.
Wow.
And I think there's a famous French, or a famous painting by a French artist of San Albino.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes, a historic.
very
painting.
cool.
Yeah.
I can't remember what museum it's at right now, but maybe I can Google it.
So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about some of the architecture and San Albino Church that you're telling us about.
Yeah, so again, I know it's kind of sad, but once we leave the site, my understanding of the history gets a little more shaky. But yeah, so this is another time where we're seeing some additional influences in the regional architecture, and that's kind of why we see the bricks that we do at San Albino. It's because he was like, I'm a French man. We make things out of rock.
Yep. It's very different if you look at the church. Just like go stand in the plaza and you see like the adobe buildings.
Yes.
And then the church is just this beautiful brick.
Exactly.
It
It is
stands out.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, Father Grange takes over the mortgage. He starts, owning and operating the space. Actually, when we go to get some B-roll later, we have a blown up image of Father Grange standing in the Reynolds store with Charles Reynolds.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we'll definitely have to get an image of that so everybody can see what I'm kind of talking about. But he was involved prior to taking over the mortgage. Then he starts to live in the house. He has his housekeeper, and then what I think is really great about that is when he is like, all right, I don't need to own the place anymore, everything like that, he signs it over to Perla Aldib. And she, again, we have another great story of women getting ownership rights. And so what she does is she runs the storefronts, and then she starts renting out the additional rooms, so that she can have a little bit of income. A little additional income, to help support herself.
Did she run a mercantile as well? Or?
Yes, yeah. So she was running the storefronts and also apartments. Verbo.
It's awesome.
Verbo.
Yeah, it's very interesting that at different times in history, right next door, two women at some point ran the storefront or the mercantile.
I won't get on my soapbox too much, but I think that's very telling of New Mexico. Like I said, I'm originally from Ohio, Midwest, and a lot of the history that we go over is, couldn't have property, can't buy a house, everything you have gets signed over to your husband, or your father has ownership, or if your father dies, your brother gets it. And that we're in Women's History Month. That's a disappointing history. But then when we start looking at very similar time period here in New Mexico, even if it wasn't super widespread, women did have these opportunities. And it almost feels like when I'm reading back through the historical documents and everything, women were almost more revered here. And I think there's a lot to that, just with cultural influence, that I'm absolutely not an expert, but I think that's really beautiful to talk about, and to think about, of same time period, few thousand miles apart. We're looking at a different view on women and their role in the community, which is nice.
And I think that probably comes down to, and we're not cultural experts, but I think that can come down to, of course, the Mexican influence, the Spanish influence, and also the indigenous influence, and really kind of the matriarch of the family.
Yes.
Being so important, and likely why women were given these properties, or deeded over the properties and things like that. Were entrusted to care for these big things.
Exactly. Yeah, because as you were saying, my technical background is cultural anthropology, and so as you were saying, we're talking about communities that historically do have, or put more emphasis on matrilineal lines and the importance of women within the society structure, the community structure. And I think even as we're seeing, expansion across what will become the U.S., Manifest Destiny, all of the, goofy things that people came up with, we're still seeing those matrilineal and those influences of these cultural aspects, kind of not getting swept away fully, and still holding their ground, even if it's in small ways.
Yes.
Love it.
I don't know how much you know about this, but we've done some really cool episodes on the Camino Real and stuff like that. So the Camino Real came through this area?
Yes,
Okay.
it did. The other historic site that I oversee, actually, Fort Selden Historic Site, is the Paraje Robledo. So it does come right through. And what do we... I've already started down the train, so I'm just going to keep going.
Let's go. I love it.
The Camino Real wouldn't have existed here if not for the long-lasting, very old indigenous tradeways that, run from South America all the way up this way, a little bit further north, And so it's kind of fun that like Mesilla was even a paraje. It was a stop, a welcome campsite along the journey, and I'll speculate. We kind of see it, right? We have a community kind of stopping here along this trade route. Whether it was initially indigenous, then Spanish influence. It starts coming up this way. People are gathering here. There's a water source very nearby. Like I said earlier, it does kind of shift back and forth a few times.
The river moves a little.
Yeah, floods, dries up, moves a little bit, finds a new path, but it always stays typically in the general area. But we have a water source, we have a gathering place, and then communities start forming. And I don't know, I think that's kind of fun. Small things, thousands of years of history, all culminating into a territorial community. Yeah. It's fun.
Awesome. I love when we go down a rabbit hole like this.
Yeah, we do that a lot.
Let's go ahead and jump into, I guess, the more modern era. And let's talk about the amazing Mr. Taylor and his beautiful wife and the Taylor family, who have just been absolutely wonderful. And if you're local, you've probably heard of Mr. Taylor and the Taylor family.
Definitely.
Yes, but I also don't want to... Mr. Taylor, who has done wonderful things for this entire nation, in my opinion, but also his amazing better half, Mary Daniels.
Oh, yes. We have to talk about her.
Yes.
Where do you want to begin?
Where do you want to begin? I'm
Where's she from? I saw up front that she was from El Paso. Right?
Yeah,
okay.
She was from El Paso. So, yeah, let's start there. So, Perla Aldib is actually who signs the deed over.
Was there a connection there between Miss Aldib and the Taylors, or?
Not that we're aware of. I'm sure one of their children could probably speak better to it. Right. But they actually had a small house just up the street here. Wow. And then from what I've gathered from talking to the children, it was more of a, we're getting ready to grow our family and we need a little more space. And so they fall in love with this beautiful historic home. Like I said, this room wasn't here originally, originally when they took
when
over
the Taylor
deed.
family came here.
Yeah. This actually was outside. The room that we were sitting in was outside. And so they take over the deed. I think that was 53, pretty sure.
Yes, it's 1953.
Okay.
Look at that.
You know your stuff.
Thank you. I like when I'm right. And, they start building their family here. And they're here for 60 plus years. 7 children, grandchildren are coming through the house 24/7. There was never an assigned room for the kids. John never got just one room, which is why, side note, when we talk about the rooms, we never refer to them as somebody's room, other than Paul and Mary's room. That's the only room that is tied directly to the Taylor family name. Because they would move through the rooms, they'd share a room, get a little bit older, they get to move into a room that they got to sleep in by themselves. Then they grow up, they move out, next child gets to move up in the space. And that's I think a really fun part to talk about of, we're talking about multi-generational families, and how they live within these buildings and how that changes the way that the buildings are laid out, how the homes are laid out, making additions because children keep, coming along, or maybe they want a space to sit down and share with the grandchildren. Just on the whole, we see a lot of that. So then there's J. Paul Taylor, right? An educator, was teaching in schools, then moved on to being a legislator. I have heard him be referred to as the conscience of the legislators. Yes. And he did a lot of amazing things, encouraging education for Spanish and English to make students bilingual so that they can communicate with the borderlands. I mean, that is something that I strongly believe we should do. more widespread. But
I'm going to take a point of privilege here because I can. Now, my mom was actually the second bilingual class in the state.
Really?
Yes. And so she knew Mr. Taylor. He was one of her teachers, and they actually got to go up north. And they put on like a cute little show and like dance, like Ballet Folclórico, and then they also did like water dance and stuff like that. And they stayed at either an old building, and I'll have to ask my mom, either an old building or maybe it was like in the caverns, like maybe they had gone to Carlsbad or something like that. So they had one room where all the little girls were staying in, and they looked up in the middle of the night and they saw these eyes looking at them.
Oh my gosh.
And it was bats.
Oh.
And so, of course, all the little girls just start screaming, and Mr. Taylor busts into the room to see what's wrong. And so that's one of the memories she has of Mr. Taylor. Yeah.
That's so cute.
But but my mom's like getting that bilingual education. They actually, my mom's class they traveled in the class together between elementary all the way through middle school.
Cool.
And they had the same teacher every year. And so they all grew up together, and they all had that same teacher.
That's awesome.
That's really
And half
cool.
the day was, half the day was English, half the day was Spanish.
I love that. I love that they weren't trying to be like, no, you have to only learn English. They were able to learn in Spanish as well. And keep their
Exactly.
beautiful language. So
Yeah.
awesome.
He did a lot of work to help support indignant communities as well. So just all around, always doing great things to help the community. And then there's his wife, Mary Daniels Taylor, incredible historian. I'll give the gift shop a shout out. They do sell her book.
Oh, cool.
And so it's Mesilla, A Place as Wild as the West Ever Was. But she was a historian. She looks at the local history, but she was also a photographer. So while they were owning the building for a period of time, the Barella store, what we refer to as the Barella store, was actually her studio.
Oh, wow.
And so she would do her printmaking up there and process her photographs. If we look around all throughout the house, you'll find different pieces of hers. She also was such an influential historian that she has an entire archive at NMSU and they told me it is enough film and materials to cover like 4 football fields.
Wow.
Yeah, to run the length of like 4 football fields. So she was just doing a lot always, and raising a family of 7 children, and cooking dinner. They were such a kind family that they'd go to church on Sunday, and by the time that they had walked from St. Albino across the street, they had collected a gaggle of additional people to come join them for Sunday brunch or for dinner. And that's, I think that's a good testament to the kind of people that they were so busy and doing so much, but they always made time to take somebody in off the street and have dinner.
Wow.
That's incredible.
I do want to mention, because it's so prominent in their home, they have a lot of religious sacramentals throughout the
Yes.
home. And I thought it was important to mention because it was obviously very important to them.
Yeah. So much so that behind you actually is the oratorio, which has an active altar. So some of their children have been married here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Isn't that
That is so
amazing?
sweet.
Isn't
Yes.
It's absolutely incredible.
So when during the holidays, I don't know if you all have ever done the tours, but during Christmas time, you can come up and they put out all the nativity sets.
Yeah.
Because the Taylor family had quite a collection, and they're beautiful.
Over
We see a
200.
few, yeah.
Over 200 nativities.
Oh,
And so in
wow.
this room, you can see some really beautiful ones. I'm sure they're not all out right now.
No, they are
Yeah.
not. So these are the ones that are out are the ones that the Taylor family always had on display. So that's actually a fun little note, just to give some context to why the museum looks the way it does, is the donation agreement between the Taylor Family Trust and the state of New Mexico asks that we leave the home to look as though it was lived in, which we've done. The only things we've really done are small adjustments. We had to install a security system, a fire system, bring it up to standards so that it could be publicly
I see the
open.
ramps so that folks with
ADA accessibility,
can
absolutely. All the steps that we have to take to make it a public building. And so with that, where the fire alarm is, maybe we've had to shift an item or a piece down a few inches. Otherwise, everything has remained where it was during the family's residency. And so
this is Mary and Paul's, like, this is how they decorated their home.
This is exactly how they decorated it.
That's beautiful. I love it.
And you'll notice there is very little wall left uncovered.
Oh, yeah.
So was all this art theirs, or was it?
All of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yes, it was their collection.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Mr. Taylor, J. Paul Taylor, he started collecting around the age of 5. He received some pots, some pottery, and it really spurred him on. Yeah. He just kept collecting all throughout his life.
That's incredible.
You can definitely see they're collectors.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It is.
Talking about Mary Taylor, I do want to mention that we participate in a archives bazaar every year.
Oh, yeah.
And in one of our most recent, not the most recent, but Mr. John Paul Taylor came, and he came to our table, and he said, he asked his questions and things like that, but he did mention that his wife was a volunteer in the clerk's office.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so fun.
I don't know how they had so much time.
I know, how did they have so much time?
I am telling you, they are incredibly impressive people.
That's
they
amazing.
were doing the most 24/7, and it's really impressive.
I think that's why their name has just stuck around here so long, because they had such an impact in so many different ways, and like you said, it seemed like people just we're so attracted to them naturally. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
So the couple times I got to meet Mr. Taylor, and by the time I'd got to meet him, his mobility was not great. He was in a wheelchair by then, but even then, you can tell how happy he was to see you. Even though he didn't know me, but I would tell, my mom was one of your students or something like that. And I think what people will tell you about Mr. Taylor is how humble he was. He didn't need to talk about all the amazing accomplishments that he had, but that he was just happy to talk and for people to say hello, and that he was a humble guy.
I love that. That's sweet.
Even prior to us taking ownership of the property, he would open the doors to school groups and visitors. And so we did have some staff, in the years prior to us opening the museum to the public as a historic site, who worked with Mr. Taylor and, would participate and kind of lead those guided tours. And then they get to the Sala Grande and he'd be sitting in the chair behind me. And, he would interact and, say, oh, they asked about this, go grab that piece in the next room and bring it in here. And that is just so incredible to open your doors just already.
Absolutely. So in 1982, there was a major rehabilitation project that took place. Can you kind of talk about that?
In 1982, I'm not sure what it's referring to on the major rehabilitation. Right. I know that over the years, they did adobe work, replastering. Like I was saying, this room was added on in the 1970s when there was another historic building that was being torn down, so they reclaimed the vigas. And so that's why the room is the size that it is because that was the size of the vigas.
I love that.
Yeah.
And we kept saying that it was done in the 70s, and I thought they did such a good job at integrating this room with the historical portion of the house.
Exactly. And, so I'm not sure what the 1982 one is referring to in particular, but over their tenancy, they did a lot of preservation work. And their son, Pat Taylor, he is actually widely well known for his work with adobe preservation. And, he's working on, there's a house just behind us off the street that the nonprofit that he works with and runs is redoing so that the historic buildings can stay.
Awesome.
So
there are very few people around. That's why Pat is so well known, who know how to make those adobes still.
yes.
Yeah. My mom's house is adobe, and I'm like, if you want to fix this wall, you better call Pat, because I don't know who's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
So in 2003, the Taylors donated the property to the state.
Yes.
Okay.
So 2003, the donation agreement in its first form is drawn up, and it is agreed upon between the state of New Mexico and the Taylor Family Trust. A big portion of that was that it was upon their passing, which is, I'm looking for the best way to put it, is saddening in a way that the museum couldn't become what it is now until both Mary and Paul
They didn't
were
get
gone.
to see it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I will say we hold to that donation agreement and the historic reports and the work that was done during their lives, and from 2003 to when we opened in November, we refer to those documents almost religiously to ensure that we are being the best stewards of their goals that we can be. But it is, there's a tone of sadness to it that they didn't get to see what they had signed over come to fruition. But their children do.
Yes.
And their grandchildren do, which is nice.
Yeah. That's one thing I love about it too, is like they have pictures all around
Oh,
of
yeah.
the family too. So, and that's not something that you guys are gonna mess with or
No.
anything like that. That's, part of this house. So
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
They were also very clear in the donation agreement. The historic site was never meant to be about them or, telling their family history and stuff like that. Of course, that is embedded into what we do. There is no escaping it, right? Like, you walk through the north side and you see these beautiful portraits. Well, that's J. Paul's grandmother and great-grandmother. It is embedded into the story we tell here. But the purpose that they left us with was being here for the community, telling the story of the borderlands, doing that through the artwork. The artwork throughout the house is, we see a lot of religious iconography, which is very important to the cultural makeup of the area. We see a lot of folk art of whether it's from northern Mexico into the southern New Mexico. We see tin work, which is, like we were talking about earlier, very, very important and long lasting here in New Mexico. And that's the mission that they left us with, is to tell the story of the borderlands, tell the story of Mesilla, and be here for the community and tell the community's story, just through their collection and through the architecture of their home. You can see the influences if you walk each room. You can see the slight differences, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is. Absolutely.
Also, what a fun time capsule for the family.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
This feels like it's the horse room.
Yes. Yeah. There
Horses, love it.
there are a lot of depictions of churches and a lot of horses.
Yep.
I love it. Do they come visit often, like their great grandchildren or?
Yeah, they do. And so in the oratorio, the remains of J. Paul Taylor, Mary Daniels Taylor, and their son Johnny, they are interned here.
Okay.
Obviously, we do not own the remains,
Right.
but they do come to visit their family, and that is something that, of course, is built into the donation agreement, but it is also just very built into us being stewards. It's important that they remain being able to have that connection to this house.
I think it's so beautiful that the oratorio is, when it's an active chapel, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, active altar.
Yeah, active altar.
Yep.
And that they also get to be here. I think it's
Yeah.
just really,
It's incredible.
yeah. I think it's really beautiful. I love it.
It is. And I know I keep using the same descriptors over and over, but it is. It's beautiful. And the staff here, the state of New Mexico, we are very lucky to be the stewards of this site.
So I want to jump into what Angelica has over there, because I'm sure you had fun researching, Angelica.
When we're doing research in the property records, we have with limited information. So we saw, or I read, that how Perla acquired the property, right?
Do tell.
So, well, with inheritance from Father Grand, right? But I didn't find the deed for that, or the transfer of property. I didn't have enough time.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't find an exact date. If it was an inheritance, did it go through probate? You know, there's so many factors in where I could search. But what I do have is the deed from Perla to J.P. Taylor and his wife in 1953. And it describes the property as an adobe, you know, it talks about it being adobe, 0.404 acres, a tract of land situate west of the plaza in the town of Mesilla. So it gives exactly where it's at in the Mesilla Civil Colony Grant. And then the description of the property. I also came across, and I don't know what the story is about it, but there's a mortgage deed from J. Paul Taylor as the grantor, which usually in a mortgage, the grantor is the borrower, to Perla. And I believe it's the same property. And so I thought that was interesting as well. So I don't know what this backstory is, but a lot of times our records, you know, they tell something that we don't know about, right?
Right,
From what was happening with the property. And then I did come across other transfers for Perla.
Yeah.
So maybe when she purchased other property.
Okay, so let's go ahead and I guess kind of wrap up the episode. What do you want to tell us, and what do you want our viewers to know about maybe the future, how folks can come and interact with this beautiful property?
Yeah. To our viewers and our future visitors, I hope, I think the best thing I can tell you is when you're on your way here, come with no preconceived notions, because you're going to think, oh, it's a house museum. It's not. And it is also not like any art museum you've ever been in before. And so just come with an open mind and be ready to experience something brand new, something very unique. And then be ready to ask questions. Our team here, our interpretive team, even down to our customer service rep, Ed, are incredibly knowledgeable on different facets of the history. Before we started in here earlier, I was saying that, you know, like for some of these questions, like Alexandra would be the best person to talk to, who's our instructional coordinator. But when we're talking about architecture, the best person for you to ask your questions to is going to be Ranger Daniel. And, you know, and I think that's really fun that, like, you know, we each have our kind of niche, but we come together to combine and talk about it. And so when our visitors come, really do just have that open mind, and be ready to ask questions, because, you know, while I might not know exactly who made the figure, like, you know, if I'm looking at one of the pieces, I might not know off the top of my head who made that figure, because there's over 4,000 objects on the site. But, you know, it'll take me just a little bit of time to talk to our collections specialist, and then bam, I've got an answer, and now it's in our iPad, which we share with everyone. And I don't know, I just want people to come and experience it, and see what we're doing differently, and enjoy it.
Yeah. And so what are some of the interactive things that folks can come and do? You mentioned the tin working class earlier.
Yes. So I'll split it into two. One, we have our on-site interactives. So that's going to be the architecture kiosk, which is in the Sala Grande. You can go up, you can click on the map. It's a map of the building, and then it'll tell you about different very interesting architectural features in the house that are different from maybe another room in the house. So that's really cool. We also have our map kiosk, which is in the center of the Sala Grande, but that one is going to show you maps throughout history on different topics. So we've talked a lot about the river. We have a portion on that kiosk where you can click on the river maps, and then it helps tell the story of how, depending on where the river was at certain points in history, determined whether you were in Mexico or in the United States. And that's just one of the maps. We also have Confederate maps and all sorts of stuff that kind of help tell the broader story of Mesilla. So those are two of our interactives. And then in the visitor center, the Reynolds store, we have our story vault, which is where our visitors can come in and they can go into it's kind of like a dark little room with a curtain, and they can record their own oral histories and answers to prompts that we've put on. And then we do share those prompts with NMSU archives, so they go into the oral history archives as well. And then we do some small editing on the back, make sure nobody's saying any profanities or anything crazy. And then we upload those to our fourth interactive, which is the listening stations. So even if you didn't want to record your own oral history, or maybe you don't have the answer to the prompts that are up right now, you can sit down and put on the headphones and you can listen to your neighbors, or a lot of times we see people coming to visit Mesilla because their grandmother grew up here, and they want to know about the stories that she's told, and so they can come in and they can sit down and they can listen to these oral histories that have been recorded. We have some that date back quite a few years, and it lets the community have a voice. It's not me sitting before you saying, this is the story of Mesilla. It is coming from the multi-generational families that have lived here. And so that's really cool.
That is very cool. Awesome. I love that.
Yeah. We really jokingly refer to it as the Messiapedia.
Love.
And so those are kind of our technological interactives. We also put on a lot of programming. So that could be our Taylor Talks that we do once a quarter. So our next one is actually April 18th. Yes, it is April 18th. And that is a free event. It's kind of like a lecture series. It is a lecture series. So we do that. We do a lot of outreach on the plazas and in the local community. So you'll see us tabling a lot. Then we do ranger-led programs. So our most recent one was actually done in the rear courtyard here, and it was a paper mache workshop. So people got to see the different stages of making a piñata, and they got to take home a kit to do some paper mache themselves, with instructions. They got to learn about the history of paper mache, which is just so cool. Our next one will be on furniture, and so even in this room you can actually see, so we have some
like Spanish chairs.
Yeah, they're Spanish colonial chairs, and so they are not held together using any nails or screws. They use tension to hold them together, so much so that these are 18th century chairs, and they are still here.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So quite impressive. And tension chairs are easier to travel with on like the Camino Real, because you don't have to pull apart the screws and the nails and everything. You just pull the pieces apart. Tension's not holding it together anymore, and you can slip that into your wagon a lot easier. Easier to put together too when you're traveling.
This is so cool.
Yeah, and so we do stuff like that. Programs where you get to learn about them. They usually have some kind of hands-on component. One that we did in the past that I thought was really cool was the tin working workshop. And so we did that in the Reynolds store. It was prior to the whole museum being open. But we had all of the tools that you would need, that everybody could just kind of borrow and share with each other at tables. And then people were able to make their own light switch covers.
I was thinking, do you need new light switch covers?
Yeah. So it's really cool. And so we do a lot of stuff like that. Of course, the museum experience, we have two options. There's the self-guided experience, which takes you through the center of the home, but we do also do guided tours. And those are Wednesdays through Saturday, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. as of right now. We do hope to add more, but of course that'll come with our docents being trained, more and more of them being trained. And then of course, if our staff were to grow, that would be awesome, because then we would have maybe like a second ranger who could give tours.
Very cool. All right, y'all. Well, this was a fun episode. To all of our viewers, hope you all enjoyed, and please take advantage and come and view this beautiful, beautiful historic site that we have. My name is Caroline Zamora. I'm the Chief Deputy County Clerk. Thank you for listening to the Preserving History and Democracy podcast. I want to thank Angelica Valenzuela, our recording and filing supervisor, for joining us and for researching for us. We appreciate it. Also want to thank Cynthia Diaz, our communications coordinator, for all that you do. And of course, behind camera today, Jacob Slaughter, who edits and makes us all look great. Thank you, Jacob. But I really want to thank Emily Wilson and for joining us today and this really on-tour episode that we're doing here at the Taylor Historic Site, here at Taylor-Mesilla Historic Site. Yep. And thank you all for listening. Be sure to follow us on our social medias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Libsyn, Apple, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube, and we will see you next time.